Let's wander back in time. Not far, just to, say, 1998. In the US, Bill Clinton says he didn't have sexual relations with Monica Lewinsky. Over here, Tony Blair has just delivered peace to Northern Ireland and is, apparently, the new messiah. To celebrate all that's good in the world, you've just splashed out on the recently introduced Mercedes C43 AMG, with a stonking 306 bhp. That's plenty, you think. Fast forward 20 years and things have changed. It turns out Bill told a porky, half the world is now at war, and unless you have a C63 with up to 503 bhp, you're nobody. Or are you? You see, the Mercedes AMG C43 is back, but is just 362 bhp now enough to tickle your fancy? That number comes from a 3.0-liter twin-turbo V6, plugged into a conventional 9-speed automatic rather than the C63's 7-speed MCT unit. It has 4Matic all-wheel drive as standard. There's no rear-wheel drive option, but it's biased to send 69% of the torque rearwards. Although the C43 might be considered an AMG light by some, AF Ultrabox hasn't merely added power and said, "That'll do." There are steering knuckles from the C63 and more negative camber dialed into the front and rear geometry to allow the tires more cornering bite. The menacing, wider track and flared arches of the C63 are, sadly, off the menu, though. It's not slow. 0 to 62 miles per hour is cracked in 4.7 seconds and the twin turbos boost up smartly, making the throttle responsive. They add gut slowdown, so it feels almost as rapid accelerating from 2000 revolutions per minute in the gears, as it does running through them. Be diligent on the upshifts, mind, for a couple of reasons. It's pretty keen to rev, and the illusory red line tricks you into looking like a fool. It says 6,500 revolutions per minute but, bizarrely, you career into the limiter at just 6,000 revolutions per minute. The 9G-tronic box is smooth when shifting automatically, but go all out with the settings. Dynamic select switch to Sport Plus, gearbox in manual mode, and it punches up the gears with a flick of the pedal. It's more obtrusive going down the gears, refusing to downshift if the revs will breach 4,000 revolutions per minute once the change is executed. Sport Plus mode does other things, of course. It weights the steering, but not overtly, so it still builds resistance progressively and gives you a good sense of what the front end is up to. And it pops open the valves in the switchable exhaust. Now, noise is subjective, so you may think differently, but for us, it doesn't sound that great. Sure, you get contrived barks on upshifts and crackles on the way down, but the main theme is an amplified V6 buzz, rather than orchestral, multi-cylinder symphony. If anything, this is the C43's biggest flaw, compared with the joyful noise of its bigger capacity C63 brother. Normally, you get into a car like this and soften the suspension so it can cope with our woeful roads, but not this one. Comfort mode, you see, is soft, but in the manner of a bouncy castle. Every movement off a bump or crest takes a while to settle, especially at the rear, and because there's always another undulation to hit, effectively you're in a state of constant oscillation. Stick it in its firmest setting and all that secondary motion vanishes, transforming the drive. There's enough absorbency left to keep things stable as you hit an imperfection, but with more viscosity in the dampers, the aftermath is kept to one bounce only. Lateral roll, as you fling the C43 hard into corners, is minimal, too. Despite its rearward bias, the four-wheel drive doesn't offer any of the C63's playfulness. Roll off the throttle on the way into bends, or hoof it out, and you can sense some movement at the rear, but, ultimately, it wants to push on at the front. To compensate, it delivers tremendous traction, firing you off an apex whatever the weather. And for many, that will be fine, so long as it can keep you comfortable covering big distances. It can, with little wind noise and bearable tire drone on motorways, but again Sport Plus, surprisingly, delivers the best ride. You need to put up with some heavier jolts, but, overall, it's better controlled so you're not constantly wobbled this way and that. Inside it's well equipped and just as fancy to sit in as the rest of the C-Class range. We're still not convinced that the underlying quality is up to Mercedes' legendary billing, but the fine mix of materials means that it's dressed to impress. It's practical, too, with space for 2 adults in the rear and a sensibly sized boot. Go for the full-fat C63 if you can afford it, because it's an absolute try-it. If you can't, and still want to have a playful rear-wheel drive car, then how about downsizing to a BMW M2? Not bothered about silly sideways stuff? Then at £15,500 less than the C63, the C43 Coupe is a comfortable, all-weather, cross-country beast. And any doubts that 367 bhp isn't enough turn out to be poppycock. It's plenty quick enough. One final question remains, is it as polished as a BMW 440i? No, not quite. But it's not far off.